Welcome to the Webinar Talk Show. I'm Eliz Green.
And I'm Tom Singer. And Eliz and I created this show to show everybody that interviews are a great way to share information and get engagement, not only with the expert, but also with the audience. Because we don't believe that all conferences or webinars should just be talking heads over PowerPoint.
Yes, indeed. Perhaps maybe no conferences should be talking heads over PowerPoint. Although, I have come to adjust my thinking about that because I'm working with a pest control association this week. And, there is need sometimes for highly detailed information, and PowerPoint is great for that. But to really delve in, an interview after that information has been delivered is a great way to go a little bit deeper. Tom, are you ready to go a little bit deeper today on how to communicate value?
I am, and I am so excited about today's guest.
I am too. So, in full disclosure, Marc is my guy. Marc Ensign is the guy that I go to when I have made a shift in what I'm doing, or I have had to pivot. I hate that word. Pivot to something else because the environment has changed, my market has changed, whatever it is. Because when you are doing your own work, marketing-wise, branding-wise, you are so close to it, it's really easy to miss what is going to land with your audience, with the people that you need to let know about what you're doing. Marc Ensign works with people who have big ideas, big dreams, to let lots and lots and lots of people know about them. He also played the bass on Broadway in the touring company of Rent, which makes him pretty darn cool. Welcome to the Webinar Talk Show, Marc Ensign.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Of course.
So let's talk about what happens when I call you and say, Marc, I have something new that I want to market to my people. And you look at what I've done to my website. Tom, you should know, he's very kind when he does this. And he says, are you going to be offended if I make this better? The answer is no, I'm not going to be offended. But oftentimes you have such a way of pulling all of the things that I have put out there into a very concise statement to the world. Why do you think it's so important that people work with professionals like you when they're really trying to convey big ideas?
I think for the same reason that a dentist doesn't do his own root canal, because you really can't see the whole lay of the land. You could set up a couple mirrors and you can kind of guess, but it just takes one little slip of the drill, and you're in a lot more trouble than when you started.
I both love and hate that analogy.
Yeah, right. It makes me cringe a little bit too.
Who is your favorite client to work with?
That's not fair. I have to say you.
Okay, no.
I'll be in.
No,
I'll be
not
in trouble.
The person. What type of client do you love working with?
So I have an affinity for people that that just have this grandiose idea that they have this that they can change the world, that they can make a difference, that put impact over income, with the idea that the income will come if they make the impact. People that aren't doing it for the influence, or they're not doing it for they don't call themselves thought leaders. Usually I find it's the people that don't call themselves thought leaders that are the thought leaders. And so it's that kind of person that really genuinely wants to help and have something to give and add value.
So Marc, you bring up an interesting thing. You say the people who call themselves thought leaders often aren't, and the vice versa. So I've always thought that, to be a thought leader, it has to be bestowed on you by other people. So how come so many people in today's, and I'm using air quotes, influencer world, think they can just call themselves an expert or a leader without
or an
having any
influencer?
experience? Or an influencer.
I because I think that it's just a catchy kind of phrase that gives people a very quick idea of of who you are. I think it covers up, for lack of a better term, some level of insecurity or not knowing. Because I think that anybody that, if I say, wow, you're an influencer, like somebody who truly is an influencer or truly is a thought leader would instantly say no, 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 because I think
Yeah.
they've gotten to a point where they realize that there's so much more out there. There's so much more to know, and there's so many more people to learn from, that it's a very humbling thought, where it's just not acceptable to, because they know that there's so much more for them to learn. I don't think we ever hit the pinnacle of like, well, got it all. I know it. I know everything now.
Right.
I'm the best. It doesn't exist.
So, Mark, many of our audience members are meeting professionals. And I think
Mhm.
your idea of this big idea, want to change the world, influence the world, that's where a lot of our meeting professionals are. They run an association that has a big idea, or you need to motivate your sales team to the next big idea, that sort of thing. When you're communicating that new thing, that big thing, that thing that maybe needs some explanation, are there some best practices that you've discovered over your time about doing that?
I think the first thing, the most important thing, is uh, putting the person you're speaking to, into the equation. If it becomes all about me and like, hey, here's what I do, and here's why it's important for me, and here's how I change the world, and here's how I do
Mm-hmm.
this, and there's nobody, like, and you're not really, positioning that person that you're speaking to in that, how it affects them or how they can make that difference.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a disconnect. It becomes like, kind of that battle of the egos versus, if what I do is all about you and about
Mm.
how I can make your vision stand out, or change the room, like if you're bringing me in as somebody who is going to make a difference in some way, and and I'm talking to you about it in a way that changes your audience,
Mm-hmm.
instead of changing myself or my positioning or whatever. I think that's the biggest key. Show me how my audience or my people, the people that I care about, the people that I serve, how they're going to be different because you stood in front of that room.
I think that's really smart. And it goes in the face of the sort of buy me, buy me, buy me, buy me
Hmm.
internet marketing that you often see. Uh, in the speaking world, we talk about what problem do you solve, and being very clear about that. It, so we're going to use language that is about the person that we're trying to serve, or the group that we're trying to serve. What else should we be keeping in mind?
And I think it's another thing that I would highly consider is how do you differentiate?
Mm,
If you're showing up and you're going to basically give the same speech as four other leadership speakers, then it
mm-hmm,
becomes a matter of like, well, who's the easiest to work with and who's the cheapest? Who can we get here on a dime? And because there's no difference between the three or four or five or 10 or 100 of you, as opposed to if you come at it from a perspective of um, here's how everybody thinks that this really works,
mm-hmm,
and here's why this is a different way. It's kind of that idea of, um, if everybody thinks one way, if you can prove that there's a different way of thinking, you will stand out, and it'll just be a more interesting conversation, because now you have an audience of people going, hey, I never really thought of it that way.
mm-hmm.
And if you can get somebody to think and get somebody to just be open to the possibility of something different, they're more apt to listen, they're more apt to take action, they're more apt to talk about it, and that's really what you want people to do. People aren't going to take massive action from their seat in that moment, but you've planted a seed that they'll then cultivate and they'll be able to take with them.
So are you talking about outcomes?
I'm talking about, I mean, ultimately that's an outcome but in that moment, I think what you're talking about is being able to see the world a little differently. Being
Mm,
able because I think that comes before outcome. Like, before I can get a certain result, I have to see things a little differently, because if I keep doing things the way that I keep doing them, and people have read the leadership books, or they've seen the leadership speakers, or or whatever, just going back to that example,
mm-hmm.
if it's more of the same, you're not going to get a different outcome, because you're just going to keep following the same advice that you followed over and over and over again. However, if somebody gets up in front of that room, or somebody, or there's a different book to read, or whatever, that turns the world upside down and makes you
Mm-hmm.
look at it differently, you're going to get a different outcome. And, hopefully ultimately it's a better outcome.
Right.
So, Mark, that makes me think. So, whether it's a speaker who's trying to position themselves, or it's a conference trying to position themselves out there, so
Mm-hmm.
often, when we're doing the planning, or we're creating our message, we know we're different. We know we stand out. And then when we create the marketing materials, we have a habit of doing it just like everyone else. We play it safe.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
how do people connect those two things? What is it that you do that helps people take that originality, that part that makes, what they're selling, spectacular, unique, and impactful, and not make the marketing look like everybody else?
It starts with asking different questions. When if you look at what everybody else is doing, if you say, like, all right, we're doing a conference on XYZ, and then you go, well, let's see who our competitors are, and then you look, and everybody has the exact same Facebook ad, or the same,
Mm-hmm.
the same iStock photo, and everybody's doing the same kind of thing. uh and then you go, all right, and that's your influence. Then, yeah, of course your conference is going to come out looking like everybody else's. I think you have to like look at those examples and say, okay, how are we different? Like, what can we do that would, again, turn whatever it is that they're doing upside down, force people to
Mm-hmm.
see it differently, and force people to see it differently in a way that they can't see it the same way anymore.
Ooh.
When you present it to in a way where they're looking at it going, like, oh wow, now every time they look at all those other conferences, they're, like, there's this seed that's been planted, that's, oh no, that's the old way. I like, this is new way, or there's this different way, or
Mm-hmm.
there's this interesting way of looking at it.
Well, isn't that the goal?
Yeah,
Look at
I
it a
think
new
so.
way, and then everybody else becomes the old way.
Right, and if you think about what we've been through over the past year, so many people and so many businesses, went out of business,
Mm-hmm.
because, oh my God, the old way doesn't work anymore. And then some people just start saying, all right, well, what's the new way to look at this? If we can't
Right.
fill the restaurant, like, how can we make delivery or pickup crazy easy? And so that's what they did. They changed their model. Some people started, delivering meals, or started, choosing different ways to market. Some restaurants now I'm in Tampa, Florida. Some restaurants took down walls and created where half the restaurant is now outdoor seating,
Mm-hmm.
to accommodate it. So, like, they barricaded the parking lot, and turned the parking lot into the dining room. So like, there were a ton of restaurants and a ton of places that actually excelled and did better, and businesses that did better over the course of the year, because they thought differently. They didn't see this as a problem as much as a challenge.
Well, and it certainly has been a challenge in the meetings industry. And
Yeah.
we're talking to lots of clients right now. And the idea of a hybrid experience is just going to be the future. We're not going to go back to everybody has to be here in person. We now are comfortable in this environment in the virtual world. Why would we turn our backs on the people that could attend in the virtual world as well? But also, we're all zoomed out.
Yeah.
So if you were advising somebody who is now going to market their big idea conference, which is a hybrid, and they're pushing at the limits. What would you suggest how would they go about knowing what's going to really hit home and now be the everything else looks old sort of idea? What are kind of the first steps to even begin to think about that?
Well, how do you run a conference that has some of the flavor of the old way, but with this new technology? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many opportunities with, I mean, even though we're zoomed out,
Mm-hmm.
initially, like if everybody said, all right, open the floodgates, let's have conferences again. I promise within 3 months, everybody's gonna be going, "Ah, I wish they would just do it over Zoom." Yeah, like because I don't want to go back out there again. um so right now we're itching to be, to have a little more human connection or whatever, but it can't go back to the old way. People don't want the old way. It's so much more comfortable to be in your pajamas, and on from the bottoms down, on a Zoom call. Um so with that in mind, like, how do you create like a hybrid model where there is some of that interaction and there is some of
Mm-hmm.
that back and forth and that experience, but over a Zoom call? I've checked out a handful of music concerts, like, that have done online, and there was one that was horrible that I was really looking forward to. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
wait. And it was, they set up two cameras towards the stage, and it just flipped back and forth, and it looked like you were watching somebody rehearse. And then there was another concert that my daughter dragged me to, which was a band called AJR, and they did this experience. They had multiple stages. They had all the different
Mm-hmm.
camera angles. They had like it was this incredible experience, where you felt like you were there, and they had the ability for everybody to applaud after songs.
Mm-hmm.
There was a button that you could press that would start an applause, then you would start to hear like a crowd cheering based on how many people were clicking the applause button.
Ooh.
You can comment and talk to people, there was a running conversation going on the side. You can choose the camera angle, so you can watch the concert from the drummer's seat, and
Ha
you can
ha.
and so there was all this different interactivity, within the concert, that made it without question better than any live concert I've ever been to in person. They really overdid themselves, and so it is possible. And it was live. Not only was it live, but then one of the mics cut out in one of the songs, and they had to stop the song and they had to restart it, and after they fixed the mic, so it was really live, and you got to experience, like, you know some of the audio issues in the middle of the concert. It was, hands down, better than just sitting there watching a TV screen with a band playing. So how does a conference create that? How do you, as a as running a conference, create that kind of experience that people go, wow, this was even better than last year's
Mm-hmm.
conference when we were there physically?
Well, I think Eliz and I know one way because 7 years ago, long before there was a pandemic, we created this whole concept of the conference talk show where for those people at home, you treat it like a television show. And what I tell everybody is, the NFL, when they plan the Super Bowl, they have different people planning the in stadium experience than are
Hmm.
planning the at home
Mm-hmm.
viewing experience. And so often conferences just want to throw a camera on the stage and just let it go. And then when they have coffee breaks or lunch live, they just put up a slide that says back in an hour. And,
Right.
we think that one of the ways to do that is to create this talk show format.
Right.
Yeah. And stuff like this, or when you can bring people on to ask questions, or you can create that level of interactivity, where it doesn't feel like you're sitting at home, or it doesn't feel like you're sitting there watching TV. Where it's also, it's not this thing where it's like, well, it's all pre-recorded so you can go check it out
Mm-hmm.
later. But actually, you can't do that if you're at a at a live conference. You can't just go like, you know what, I'm going to take lunch early, and then then an hour or two I'll watch the speaker from 2 o'clock. It doesn't work that way. Create that kind of excitement and that kind of, feeling where you're actually there and you're impacting what's going on.
Right. You want active participants, not just disengaged viewers.
Sure.
Well, you want that same thing when people are in person. It's what you know, when we were planning in-person events, we spent a lot of time talking about how is this going to be interactive? How is it going to be engaging? Because I mean, we've all been at in-person things where you're like,
Right. Well, and not only that, but if you think about in-person conferences, I think the most value that I get out of being an in-person conference is the networking, meeting people.
mm-hmm,
In other words, I'm not paying attention to the person speaking. I'm talking to the person next to me, uh, and making, and like so many conferences, like the value really is in the people.
mm-hmm,
And that's a problem for the conference because if that's the case, let's just throw a networking event and don't hire speakers, or hire create an environment where the speakers are really the where the value is coming from, where they're able to focus on the information and the reason that they're really there in the first place, because we've all been at conferences where your just mind is blown by some of the speakers that have been there, and we've all been at conferences where not so much.
indeed.
So how important then, as we kind of wrap this whole thing full circle, how important is for people listening to really think about that branding message? And if they can't afford to hire someone like you, or they don't know anybody like you, what can people do on their own to be able to recognize how to get that message out there? How do I communicate my uniqueness and why, we're the best place to go for whatever our product or service is?
I think the first thing that people do is they internalize things too much. It's
Mm.
I don't care who you are. I do this for a living, and when you ask me to talk about myself, I seize up because it's just because it's so hard to kind of see the forest through the trees. So if you can't afford somebody that does what we do here, what you can do is you can start talking to people who are your ideal client, who the people that should be at your conference. Have a conversation with them. Say talk to them about what's important. Force yourself to see it through their eyes, because that'll get you out of your own head. What we tend to do is we tend to say like, all right, I'm going to put on a conference, so I'm going to try to figure out 90% of this myself, and then I'm going to ask somebody else that I work with that's equally as stuck as I am, what they think, and they're just going to go, well, it's better than what I would have come up with, so sure, that's fine, let's just do that. And it's just this one-sided
Mm-hmm.
approach to your conference message, as opposed to reaching out to people who are ideal clients. Now, this does not mean post it on Facebook and take up
Crowdsource it.
crowdsource all the people you went to high school with and ask what they think. Like that doesn't like that's not what we're going for. Like find 5 people that went to the conference last year, or not everybody, because then again, too many cooks in the kitchen. 5 people that like, hey, can you give me a half hour of your time? I'll give you $100 off the conference, whatever. Just ask them and say, here's some of the things that we're thinking about doing. What would this mean to you? What's important to you? How do you currently see the environment within your industry? What are some of the biggest struggles now that we're dealing with something that we, for the past year, and people are starting to, take their head out of the sand and start to look around and start, realize that this is real and this is not going to change all that much over the next
Mm-hmm.
couple of years. And so really just having those conversations with people outside of your circle, I think, is probably the most important thing.
I think that's very smart. So if someone wanted to put you in their circle,
Hmm?
which I would really highly recommend, how would they get
Me
a hold
too.
of you?
The best place to go is just check out our website, loudmouse.com. It's mouse, not mouth. Everybody,
Like
if
that.
you don't pronounce that S strong enough, everybody goes to loudmouth and they're like, this doesn't look like what we thought it was gonna. No, it's loudmouse.com, and again, what we do is we basically figure out what that differentiating factor is. What's that voice that we want to now amplify and drive people towards that big idea of yours.
Fantastic. Well, Mark, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. And I
Of
took a lot
course.
of notes. I really appreciate it. Even though I get to
I
talk
did.
to you one on one, I still took a lot of notes.
I feel bad. I didn't write a single thing down.
That's all right. I have notes. All
Okay,
right.
good.
Thanks so much. Tom, we'll
Sure.
be back on Wednesday with.
We've got John from Excel Events, and we're going to talk about event platforms and the platform that he has created, and just sort of how events can really excel when they have the right platform.
I'm excited about that because really, if you can't get people to come to your conference, how are you going to demonstrate your value? How are you going to communicate that value? So, we're going to continue on with our theme of communicating value as we go through this quarter. You can find all of the recordings on Facebook and join us live on Monday and Wednesdays at 11 on webinartalkshow.live. You can find what we do for clients at webinartalkshow.com. Marc, thanks again for joining us. It was always a pleasure to speak with you. I'm glad other people got to hear what you do. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.